The sleek, silver scout ship of the Galactic Concorde hung motionless above Earth's atmosphere. Its metallic skin reflected the blue glow of the planet below, creating an almost ethereal appearance against the backdrop of stars. Inside the vessel, Commander Taiwan stood rigid at the central command console, his four-fingered hand trembling slightly as he scrolled through the sensor data. Taiwan's normally pale green skin had taken on a sickly yellow tint. His large, oval eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress among his species. "This cannot be right," he said, voice barely above a whisper. He turned to Science Officer Ji Hyun, who stood nearby analyzing the same information on her personal terminal. "Ji Hyun, verify these readings again. There must be an error in our systems." Ji Hyun, taller than the commander with smooth blue-tinted skin and delicate facial ridges, looked up from her screen. Her expression remained professionally composed, though the slight flutter of her neck membrane betrayed her own disbelief. "I have run the diagnostics 3 times, Commander," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "All ship systems are functioning at optimal capacity. The readings are accurate." Taiwan turned back to the display, the blue light illuminating his troubled face. "But this defies all known parameters for sentient evolution. The gravity is 1.3 times the Concorde average. The atmospheric pressure would crush the lungs of most spacefaring species. The radiation levels from their sun alone should cause cellular damage over time. And the oxygen content, it's practically corrosive." Ji Hyun moved to stand beside him, her slender fingers adjusting the viewscreen to display images of Earth's surface, sprawling cities, dense transportation networks, massive industrial complexes. "And yet," she said, "look at their civilization. They've built cities that span continents. Their communication network blankets the planet. They've even established primitive bases on their moon and neighboring planet." "On a Class 5 Deathworld," Taiwan murmured. In the Galactic Concorde's classification system, worlds were rated from 1 to 5, with 5 being theoretically too hostile to produce advanced life. "We've never encountered sentient life from anything above a Class 3. The ship's communications officer, Gai-ho, swiveled in his chair. "Commander, we're receiving transmissions from multiple Earth governments. They've detected our presence despite our stealth systems." Taiwan blinked in surprise. "Their technology is more advanced than we anticipated. How is this possible?" Ji Hyun studied additional data flowing across her screen. "Evolution, Commander. These humans adapted to survive in conditions that would kill most Concorde species. Their bodies are dense, with thick skin and robust internal organs. Their bones contain minerals that would be toxic to us. They drink water containing chemicals that would poison most known species." "Fascinating," Taiwan said, his scientific curiosity temporarily overriding his caution. "And dangerous. Should we abort the mission?" The ship's strategic officer, Byung-ho, joined the conversation. His crimson uniform stood out against the silver blue of the command deck. "I advise against that, Commander. Our scans show they possess nuclear weapons and primitive spaceflight capability. They're on the verge of discovering faster-than-light travel. Concorde protocol is clear. Contact must be established before they develop interstellar capabilities." Taiwan considered this information, his fingers drumming lightly on the console. "Very well. Prepare the diplomatic shuttle. Ji Hyun, you'll accompany me. Byung-ho, select a security team. But no weapons. We must appear peaceful." "No weapons?" Byung-ho questioned, his brow ridges rising in concern. "Commander, these beings evolved on a planet that tried to kill them daily. What kind of temperament might such a species develop?" Taiwan straightened his formal diplomatic robe. "We follow protocol. The Concorde has encountered over 300 new species, and peaceful contact has been successful in all but 7 instances. None of those were from Deathworlds," Byung-ho muttered, but he bowed slightly in acknowledgement of the order. The shuttle's descent through Earth's atmosphere was turbulent. The craft shook violently as it pushed through layers of air denser than any the Concorde diplomats were accustomed to. Ji-hyun monitored the external sensors, her expression growing increasingly concerned. The atmospheric chemistry is even more complex up close, she reported. There are thousands of compounds our filters don't recognize. Will our breathing apparatus function properly? Ta-1 asked, adjusting the thin translucent mask that would convert Earth's air to something his lungs could process. Yes, but I recommend limiting exposure to 4 hours maximum, Jae-hyun replied. The shuttle broke through the cloud layer, revealing a sprawling military base below. Several human aircraft escorted them down, primitive but clearly armed. They're cautious, Ta-1 observed. A good sign. Truly aggressive species rarely show restraint. The landing was smooth, and as the shuttle's ramp extended to touch Earth soil, Ta-1 felt a momentary wave of vertigo. The gravity pulled at him more strongly than he had expected, making his movements feel sluggish and requiring more effort. A delegation of humans waited on the tarmac. They stood in neat rows, some dressed in military uniforms adorned with colorful symbols, others in what appeared to be formal civilian attire. At their center stood a tall human with silver hair and an air of authority. Ta-1 led his team down the ramp, each step requiring conscious effort against Earth's pull. The air, even filtered through his mask, felt heavy and wet compared to the crisp, light atmosphere of his homeworld. The silver-haired human stepped forward as they approached. Up close, Ta-1 was struck by the sheer density of the human form, solid, heavy, like living stone compared to the more delicate structure of his own people. The human stood nearly a head taller than him, with a frame that seemed built to withstand forces that would shatter most Concord citizens. "Welcome to Earth," the human said in a deep, resonant voice that had been processed through translator devices both sides had hurriedly prepared. "I am Admiral Han of Earth's United Defense Force. On behalf of the nations of Earth, we greet you in peace." To Ta-1's shock, the human extended a hand, a greeting gesture their preliminary data had identified. The commander hesitated, then slowly reached out. When their hands met, Ta-1 flinched involuntarily at the casual strength in the human's grip. What the human clearly considered a gentle handshake felt like it could easily crush the bones in Ta-1's hand. "Commander Ta-1 of the Galactic Concord," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We come with peaceful intentions to establish diplomatic relations between our civilizations." Admiral Han smiled, showing teeth that looked alarmingly sharp to Ta-1's eyes. Another adaptation to a carnivorous diet that would be unnecessary on gentler worlds. "We hope this marks the beginning of a productive relationship between our worlds," Han said. His eyes, small by Concord standards but keenly intelligent, studied the aliens with obvious curiosity. Ji-hyun stepped forward, her scientific equipment scanning the surroundings. "Your world is quite remarkable, Admiral. We have never encountered sentient life evolving in such extreme conditions." Han's expression showed confusion. "Extreme. I assure you, Earth is quite hospitable." Of course, Ta-1 interjected diplomatically, while thinking to himself that only a species born on a Deathworld would consider such conditions hospitable. He realized then that these humans had no frame of reference. This lethal environment was normal to them. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying realization of all. These humans hadn't just survived their harsh world. They had been shaped by it, hardened by it, turned into beings who found comfort in conditions that would kill most sentient life. As the diplomatic team was escorted toward a nearby building, Ta-1 exchanged a meaningful glance with Ji-hyun. The Galactic Concord had just made contact with something unprecedented, a species that might redefine their understanding of life itself, and whether that would prove a blessing or a danger remained to be seen. 2 years after first contact with humanity, the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concord was in chaos. The massive circular room, designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of species, buzzed with panicked voices speaking dozens of languages. Emergency translation systems struggled to keep pace with the overlapping conversations. At the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed scenes of devastation. Beautiful crystal cities crumbled under relentless attack. Strange dark ships with jagged edges fired energy beams that cut through structures and beings alike. The peaceful Ilani, a plant-based species known throughout the galaxy for their art and philosophy, were being systematically destroyed. Counselor Daho, the human representative to the Concord, sat quietly, watching the panic unfold. In the 2 years since Earth had joined the galactic community, humans had struggled to find their place. Many species remained wary of the Deathworlders, as humans had become known in whispered conversations. Their strength, endurance, and what some saw as alarming adaptability made many uncomfortable. Next to Daho sat science liaison Sujin, carefully reviewing data on her tablet. Her eyes widened as the casualty numbers continued to climb. "This is a genocide," she whispered to Daho. "The Void Swarm is consuming everything. The Elani homeworld will be completely lost within days." The High Speaker, a tall, willowy being named Maltai, raised his 6-fingered hands for silence. The chamber gradually quieted. "We have received confirmation that over 12 million Elani have escaped the initial attacks," Maltai announced, his voice somehow both gentle and carrying. "Transport vessels are bringing them to Concord space now, but we face a grave crisis." A new hologram appeared, showing the biology of the Elani, delicate, photosynthetic beings with translucent skin that captured light and converted it to energy. Their internal systems were more like complex plants than animals. "The Elani cannot survive on any currently available Concord worlds," continued Maltai. "Their biology requires specific light wavelengths, atmospheric composition, and gravity conditions. Without their specialized environment, they will wither and die within weeks." Counselor Bin, a reptilian being from a commerce-focused species, spoke next. "We simply lack the infrastructure to create artificial environments of that scale. The resources required would bankrupt 3 sectors." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Ilani representative, one of the few who had been off-world when the attack began, swayed slightly. The light patterns on his skin, normally a sign of emotional expression, had dimmed to almost nothing, a sign of deep despair. Daho nudged Sujin. "Call Admiral Han," he whispered. "I think Earth can help." 12 hours later, Admiral Han stepped through the grand doors of the council chamber. Despite the artificial gravity being set slightly lower than Earth's standard, he moved with the easy confidence that had become the hallmark of humans in space. Behind him walked a team of Earth's top engineers and environmental scientists. Han had aged little in the 2 years since first contact. His hair remained steel gray, his posture military straight. The only new addition was a small translator device attached to his collar, allowing him to understand and be understood by all Concord species without delay. The High Speaker acknowledged him with a respectful nod. "Admiral Han, we welcome Earth's representative, though I fear you arrive at a moment of tragedy beyond solution." Han bowed slightly in return. "I've been briefed on the situation. The Ilani need homes, specific homes with environmental conditions that can't be found on available worlds." "Precisely," said Counselor Bin. "Their needs are too specialized, and the number of refugees too great. It would take years to build habitats, and the Ilani would not survive that long." Han's eyes swept the room, taking in the various representatives. Many avoided his gaze. Humans still made some species uncomfortable. "What if the habitats already existed?" Han asked. The chamber fell silent. "Explain," requested the High Speaker. Han nodded to one of his team, who projected a new hologram into the center of the chamber. It showed massive ships, each nearly 5 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide. "Earth's generation ships," Han explained. "Before we discovered faster-than-light travel, we built these vessels to carry human colonists to distant stars at sublight speeds. The journeys would have taken centuries, so they were designed as complete, self-sustaining ecosystems." A hologram rotated, showing the internal structures, vast open spaces, hydroponics bays, water reclamation systems. With the advent of FTL technology, These ships were never used for their original purpose. We have 12 of them in Earth orbit, fully built but sitting idle. Counselor Bin's scales flattened against his neck, a sign of skepticism. These are designed for humans. The Elani require entirely different conditions. Different atmosphere, different light spectrum, different gravity. It's impossible to retrofit such complex systems. Admiral Han smiled slightly. It wasn't a smile of amusement, but one of calm determination. Counselor, with all due respect, humans specialize in the impossible. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us daily. We're good at solving problems others consider unsolvable. He turned to the Elani representative. We've studied your people's biological needs. Our ships can be modified. We can adjust internal gravity fields, install specialized light emitters to match your photosynthetic requirements, and create atmospheric processors to generate your ideal gas mixture. The Elani's skin began to glow faintly, the first sign of hope he had shown. How quickly could this be done? My people have little time. We've already begun, Han replied. The moment we heard of your situation, Earth's Council authorized the project. 3 ships are being retrofitted now. The first will be ready in 10 days. Gasps echoed around the chamber. Counselor Bin rose from his seat. 10 days? That's not possible. The environmental systems alone would take months to redesign. One of Han's engineers, a woman named Minji, stepped forward. We're not redesigning, we're adapting. The ship's systems were built to be modular and adjustable. We're repurposing terraforming technology originally intended for Mars. She displayed technical schematics that meant little to most in the chamber, but caused the engineering representatives to lean forward with sudden interest. Additionally, Minji continued, we're not trying to recreate the Elani homeworld perfectly. We're creating a sustainable environment that meets their basic biological needs. It won't be identical to their home, but it will keep them alive and healthy until a permanent solution can be found. A high speaker's expression was difficult to read for those unfamiliar with his species, but his voice carried a note of wonder. You would do this for a species you barely know. The cost must be enormous. Han's expression remained steady. We were welcomed into the Concord when we were alone in the universe. Now we have a chance to offer the same to others. He paused. As for the cost, Earth considers this an investment in our shared future. What he didn't say, but what many in the chamber understood, was that Earth was also demonstrating its value to the Galactic Concord. Humans were showing that their Deathworld adaptability had created a kind of resourcefulness that more comfortable species might lack. The council erupted into discussion. Some voiced skepticism, others hope. The Elani representative approached Han directly, his translucent limbs trembling slightly. My people have always been peaceful. We have no military, no weapons. The Void Swarm attacked without warning or reason. If you can save us, humanity will have the eternal gratitude of the Elani. Han placed a careful hand on the delicate being's shoulder, mindful of his strength. We'll get your people to safety. You have my word. 9 days later, the first retrofitted generation ship, renamed New Dawn, departed Earth orbit. Its massive engines, originally designed for the slow journey between stars, now worked in concert with Concord FTL technology. Inside, specialized habitats awaited the first wave of Elani refugees. As the vessel accelerated toward the designated rescue point, Admiral Han stood on its bridge. He watched as Earth shrank to a blue dot behind them. For the first time in human history, one of their great ships was setting out among the stars, not to conquer, not to colonize, but to save a species humans had never even met before first contact. Human technology, born from the harsh crucible of a death world, was about to be put to its most noble use. The massive human vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel with a flash of blue light. 3 enormous generation ships, each modified to serve as floating worlds for the Elani refugees, decelerated as they approached the evacuation point. Their hulls gleamed dully in the light of an unfamiliar sun, battle armor covering what had once been peaceful exploration vessels. Admiral Hand stood on the bridge of the UDF Resilience, the military escort leading the rescue fleet. The view screen showed dozens of small Elani transport ships frantically loading the last refugees from orbital stations. The Elani homeworld below was already lost. Dark patches spread across its once green surface, where the void swarm had begun their consuming process. "Status report," Han ordered, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. Lieutenant Sunmai, her fingers dancing across the tactical display, responded without looking up. "Elani transports are at 82% capacity. Estimated completion time is 43 minutes. Our sensors detect no immediate threats, but there's unusual energy readings from the far side of the planet." Han nodded, studying the tactical display. The Elani had no military to speak of. Their civilization had evolved without significant predators or resource competition, creating a peaceful culture focused on art, philosophy, and gentle cooperation. When the void swarm arrived, they had no defenses. "Communications, contact the transport leaders. Tell them we're here to escort them to safety. Engineering, prepare the generation ships to receive refugees as soon as transports are in range." The bridge crew worked efficiently, each movement precise. Humans have been considered an oddity in the Galactic Concord until now. Too strong, too aggressive, too adaptable to be fully trusted. But today, those same traits might save an entire species. Captain Juwon, Han's second in command, approached with a data tablet. "Admiral, the Elani High Minister is on the last transport to leave the surface. He requests to board the Resilience once they reach orbit." Han was about to respond when alarms suddenly blared across the bridge. "Multiple contacts," Sunmi shouted, her voice rising above the warning sounds. "Void swarm vessels emerging from the dark side of the planet. Count is 17 ships. Attack formation." The view screen shifted to show dark, jagged vessels rushing toward the evacuation zone. Unlike the smooth, functional designs of Concord ships, void swarm vessels looked almost organic, like insects made of black metal, with sharp protrusions and glowing red energy points. "They're targeting the civilian transports," reported Sunmai, her fingers flying across the tactical controls. Targeting solutions indicate they'll intercept the most heavily populated transports first. The bridge fell silent for a moment. Everyone knew the Elani ships had no shields, no weapons, no chance against even a single void swarm vessel. Admiral Hand's voice broke the silence, steady and controlled. "All ships, defensive formation Epsilon. Protect those transports." The human fleet moved with surprising speed for vessels of their size. The Resilience accelerated forward, positioning itself between the oncoming swarm and the vulnerable Elani ships. Two additional military escorts flanked the sides, creating a protective wall. "Weapons status," Han commanded. "Railguns charge, missile banks ready. Energy weapons at full capacity," Sunmai responded. "Target the lead swarm vessels. Fire on my mark." The Concord liaison officer aboard the Resilience, a slender being named Bin Sol, stepped forward with concern evident in his large eyes. "Admiral, our intelligence on void swarm capabilities is limited. We've never seen anyone successfully engage them directly." Han nodded acknowledgement, but kept his eyes on the tactical display. "Then today will be educational for everyone." The first void swarm vessel fired, a beam of red energy that cut across space toward the Resilience. Several alien crew members flinched, expecting catastrophic damage. When the beam hit, the ship shuddered. Status lights flickered momentarily before stabilizing. "Impact on forward shields," reported the damage control officer. "Shield integrity at 82%. Structural integrity holding." Han showed no surprise. "Return fire. Target their weapon emplacements." The Resilience responded with a barrage that would have impressed even veteran Concord military officers. Railguns fired hypersonic projectiles that struck with kinetic force equivalent to small nuclear detonations. Energy weapons followed, targeting the weak points revealed by the initial strikes. The lead swarm vessel shuddered under the assault. Dark pieces of its hull broke away, floating into space. Direct hits, Sunmai announced. Enemy vessel's energy signature is fluctuating. Han nodded. Maintain fire. Communications, order the transports to accelerate toward the generation ships. We'll cover their retreat. The battle expanded quickly. More swarm vessels joined the attack, focusing their fire on the human ships now that they recognized the primary threat. The space between the combatants lit up with energy beams, missile contrails, and the flash of impacts against shields. On the bridge of the Resilience, a panel exploded in a shower of sparks as a particularly powerful beam struck the ship. Emergency systems activated, suppressing the small fire immediately. Shields at 64%, reported the damage control officer. We can maintain this position for approximately 20 more minutes at current damage rates. Han checked the status of the Elani transports. They were making good progress toward the generation ships, but not fast enough. Engineering. Divert power from non-essential systems to shields and weapons. Communications. Contact the other escorts. We need to buy more time. As the battle raged, one of the Elani transports suffered a glancing hit from a swarm beam that had penetrated the human defensive line. The small ship spun out of control, life support failing. Swarm vessel breaking through Sector 7. Sunmai called out. They're targeting disabled transport EC-42. Without hesitation, Han made a decision that would later be studied in Concord military academies. Helm, intercept course. Put us between that transport and the swarm ship. The Resilience broke formation, accelerating to place its bulk between the vulnerable transport and its attacker. The Void swarm vessel, sensing an opportunity, concentrated its firepower on the human ship. Multiple beams struck the Resilience simultaneously. The bridge shook violently. Status displays flashed red across multiple systems. Shields at 31%, came the damage report. Hull breaches on decks 12 through 15. Emergency bulkheads holding. But the Resilience's weapons continued firing, and the swarm vessel eventually broke apart under the relentless assault. Dispatch rescue shuttles to transport EC-42, Han ordered. Get those Elani aboard immediately. Throughout the next hour, the pattern repeated. The human ships absorbed punishment that would have destroyed most Concord vessels, while systematically targeting and eliminating swarm attackers. Their hulls, designed to withstand Earth's harsh conditions, proved remarkably resilient. Finally, the last Elani transport docked with the nearest generation ship. The High Minister's vessel approached the Resilience as planned. All transports secured, Sunmai reported. Remaining swarm vessels are regrouping for another attack. Han nodded. Prepare for jump to hyperspace as soon as the Minister's ship is aboard. We've done what we came to do. When the Elani High Minister entered the bridge, many of the humans were surprised by his appearance. Standing nearly 7 feet tall but incredibly slender, his translucent skin glowed with internal bioluminescence. Patterns of light moved across his body, the Elani equivalent of facial expressions. The minister approached Admiral Han, moving with the careful steps of a being accustomed to much lower gravity. He studied the damaged bridge, the tired but determined human crew, and the tactical displays showing the destroyed swarm vessels. Your vessels withstand attacks that would shatter our strongest materials, the minister said, patterns of blue and gold light rippling across his form in what humans had learned to recognize as awe. Admiral Han smiled slightly. We built them to survive Earth's storms, he replied simply. Your people will be safe with us now. The minister's lights shifted to a deep purple, a sign of deep emotion. You faced the void swarm directly. No species has done this and survived. You protected our people at risk to your own. Han glanced at the damage reports streaming in. 3 humans dead, 27 injured. Significant repairs needed on all vessels, but over 8 million Elani saved. That's what humans do, Han said. We protect those who need protection. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, the minister watched the human crew work. These strange, Solid beings from a world so harsh it would kill an Alani in minutes had just done the impossible. They had stared into the void and refused to blink. Perhaps, the minister said quietly, this is why you evolved on such a terrible world. You were being prepared for this moment. To be the shield others cannot be. The stars stretched into lines as the human fleet, carrying the remnants of a gentle civilization within their powerful hulls, disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind a shattered world and the first defeat the Void Swarm had ever known. The massive vessel New Horizon glided silently through the darkness of space, its kilometer-long hull illuminated by thousands of lights that glowed like stars against its dark metal skin. It was no longer just a ship, it was a world unto itself, home to beings from across the galaxy. Behind it stretched a vast armada of similar vessels, forming what had become known throughout the galaxy as the Sanctuary Fleet. 5 years had passed since the rescue of the Alani. What had begun as an emergency evacuation had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. A nomadic civilization of refugees from worlds consumed by the Void Swarm. On the command deck of the New Horizon, flagship of the Sanctuary Fleet, Grand Admiral Han stood before a massive holographic display. At 65, his hair had gone completely white, but his posture remained military straight, his eyes sharp and alert. The display showed the interior layout of the newest vessel in the fleet, a converted Concorde heavy transport that had been redesigned to house refugees from the water world Citari. The Citari habitats are complete, reported Fleet Engineer Yunho, a woman whose brilliance with environmental systems had made her indispensable to the fleet. Her fingers moved gracefully across the control panel, highlighting various sections of the ship. We've adjusted the gravity fields in sections 12 through 17 to match their homeworld. The water pressure and mineral content are within acceptable parameters. Han nodded, studying the blue-tinted habitats where the amphibious Citari would live. And the transition spaces. They'll need to interact with the rest of the ship's inhabitants. We've created gradient zones, Yunho explained, zooming in on the boundary areas. The Citari can gradually adapt as they move from their fully aquatic environments to the shared spaces, similar to what we designed for the Alani light gradient zones. Han smiled slightly. Good work. When can they begin boarding? Transport vessels will dock tomorrow. We can accommodate all 12,000 survivors. Han's expression darkened momentarily. 12,000 out of a population of millions. The Void Swarm had struck the Citari homeworld with little warning, just as they had with the Alani and 15 other worlds since. Only those off-planet, or quick enough to reach evacuation ships, had survived. Admiral, called out Communications Officer Jun Seo from his station. We're receiving a transmission from Concorde headquarters. The Diplomatic Council wishes to speak with you. Han straightened his uniform and moved to the communications area. The holographic display shifted to show 5 beings, representatives of the Galactic Concorde's leadership. At the center sat High Speaker Meltai, whose species had evolved on a world of perpetual twilight. Grand Admiral, Meltai began, his voice melodic even through the translator. The Council has reviewed your latest reports. The integration of the Citari refugees brings your total population to nearly 42 million beings from 17 different species. That is correct, High Speaker, Han replied. Another counselor, a reptilian being named Savril, spoke next. What began as an emergency measure has become something unprecedented. The Sanctuary Fleet is now effectively a sovereign entity, a multi-species civilization without a homeworld. Han had expected this conversation eventually. The fleet exists to protect those who cannot protect themselves. As long as the Void Swarm continues to consume worlds, we will continue to offer sanctuary. The counselors exchanged glances before Maltai continued. The Concorde formally recognizes the Sanctuary Fleet as an autonomous allied entity. Furthermore, we wish to provide additional resources. 3 more heavy transports are being transferred to your command for conversion to habitat ships. Han bowed slightly. The fleet thanks you for your support. There is one more matter, said Counselor Savril. Our analysis of void swarm attack patterns indicates they specifically target worlds with certain environmental characteristics, precisely the types of gentle, stable environments that produce species like the Alani and Cetari. We've noticed the same pattern, Han confirmed. They avoid worlds like Earth. Extreme environments seem to hold no interest for them, which makes your fleet and humanity uniquely positioned to stand against them. Maltai concluded. The Concord formally requests that the Sanctuary Fleet accept a defensive mandate. You will no longer just rescue survivors. You will actively protect threatened worlds. Han's expression remained calm, but those who knew him well would have recognized the slight tightening around his eyes, the only outward sign of his concern. That would mean directly engaging the swarm more frequently. The risk to the fleet would increase substantially. We are prepared to provide advanced weapon systems and shield technology, offered a third counselor. Your people's natural resilience combined with our most advanced defensive systems could create a force the swarm cannot easily overcome. Han thought carefully before responding. I will need to consult with the Fleet Council. This decision affects all species aboard, not just humans. The meeting concluded with formal pleasantries, but Han remained on the command deck long after, staring at the star map that showed known void swarm activity. The pattern was clear. They were methodically consuming worlds that matched specific criteria, worlds where life evolved in peace without the harsh challenges that had shaped humanity. 3 decks below, in a large circular chamber designed for physical training, Combat Instructor Q1 faced a group of 30 beings from 7 different species. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others moved on multiple legs. A few floated slightly above the floor. Their bodies evolved for low-gravity environments. Today we continue with basic defensive stances, Q1 explained, demonstrating a simple but effective blocking position. Remember, the goal isn't to become human. The goal is to adapt these techniques to your own physiologies. A slender Alani named Folal raised a translucent arm. Instructor, my species has never needed to fight. We have no natural weapons. Our skin tears easily. Why must we learn this? Q1 approached the Alani, his movements deliberately slow and gentle. Look at your arm, Folal. 5 years ago, it would have snapped under Earth normal gravity. Now you can move comfortably through human sections of the ship. Your body has adapted. He gestured to the diverse group. Your homeworlds didn't prepare you for conflict, he explained. Ours did. But these skills can be learned, just as your bodies have learned to withstand greater pressures, different light spectrums, new foods. A stocky Cetari, his blue-green skin glistening with the moisture his species required, spoke up. The humans fight our battles for us. Why must we learn? Because the fleet is not divided into protectors and protected, Q1 answered firmly. We are one people now. Each contributes what they can. Eleni light technology powers our agricultural sections. Cetari aquaculture feeds 1/3 of our population. Humans provide security. But these roles are not fixed by biology. They are choices. He returned to the center of the training area. Now, let us continue. Adapt the movements to your bodies. Find what works for you. As the session continued, Q1 noticed with satisfaction that the Alani's movements had become more confident. 5 years ago, the plant-like beings had been so fragile that a human child could have injured one accidentally. Now they were stronger, more resilient, still recognizably Alani, but changed by their time among humans. In the central atrium of the New Horizon, thousands of beings from diverse species mingled in what had become the heart of the fleet's social life. The space had been designed with remarkable ingenuity. Different environmental zones blended into one another, allowing various species to interact comfortably. Near one wall, a human child of about 8 sat with 3 young Elani, their skin glowing with soft patterns as they taught the human a string game from their homeworld. Nearby, a group of Cetari musicians played instruments designed to work in both air and water, creating harmonies that carried throughout the atrium. On a raised platform, representatives from each species aboard the New Horizon discussed the latest proposal from the Concord. The Fleet Council, as it had come to be known, included humans, but was not dominated by them. Each refugee group had equal voice. "The swarm destroyed our world while the Concord debated how to respond," said the Centauri representative, water occasionally spraying from his speech organs. "Now they ask us to fight their battle." "Not their battle. Everyone's battle," countered a human counselor named Jinwoo. "The swarm won't stop. Every world they consume makes them stronger." The Elani representative, a female named Thesol whose skin patterns had grown unusually complex during her years in the fleet, spoke with unexpected firmness. "We were a peaceful species. We had no concept of war, but we have learned. The humans have taught us that sometimes one must stand against destruction." Below decks, cultures merged and evolved into something entirely new, a civilization of survivors with humanity at its core, yet greater than the sum of its parts. Human children learned Elani light language alongside their native tongues. Centauri architectural concepts influenced ship redesigns. New foods, new music, new ideas flowed between species that, under normal circumstances, might never have met. As Grand Admiral Han made his way through the ship toward the council chamber, he passed through these vibrant mixed zones. Beings of all descriptions greeted him respectfully, some in human fashion, others according to their own customs. He noticed how the various species had adapted to one another, creating a unique culture that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. The Sanctuary fleet had begun as a desperate measure to save the Elani. It had grown into something unprecedented. A civilization without a planet, a people united not by biology, but by shared experience. And now, perhaps, it would become something else again, defenders of those who could not defend themselves. The darkness of deep space lit up with the eerie red glow of void swarm vessels. Hundreds of the jagged, insect-like ships surrounded the Sanctuary fleet in the largest concentration ever detected. The refugee fleet, now numbering over 300 vessels of various sizes, formed a defensive sphere with the largest habitat ships protected at the center. On the bridge of the flagship New Horizon, Grand Admiral Han watched the tactical display with grim determination. At 70 years old, his face was deeply lined, but his eyes remained sharp and clear. This was the moment he had both prepared for and dreaded for the past decade. "All ships report ready for combat, Admiral," said Tactical Officer Yummo. "Defensive systems at maximum." "But sir," he hesitated, "there are too many of them. Fleet simulations give us less than a 30% chance of breaking through their lines." Han nodded slowly. "Send the signal. Begin Operation Last Light." Throughout the fleet, specialized combat teams moved to their positions. After 10 years of fighting the Void Swarm in smaller engagements, the Sanctuary fleet had developed formidable defenses and tactics, but never had they faced such overwhelming numbers. In the central war room of the New Horizon, Science Director Minji worked frantically with her team. The room buzzed with activity as scientists from multiple species analyzed data flowing in from scout ships and sensor probes. Minji, her once black hair now streaked with gray, stared at results from their latest scan of void swarm biology. "This can't be coincidence," she muttered, comparing data sets. She tapped her communication device. "Admiral Han, I need to speak with you immediately. We found something." Minutes later, Han entered the war room, ducking slightly through the doorway designed to accommodate the taller Elani scientists. The room fell silent as he approached Minji's workstation. "What have you found?" he asked without preamble. Minji gestured to the complex display of biological signatures. "We've been asking the wrong question all these years. We kept wondering why the swarm attacks certain worlds and not others. The answer isn't about the worlds at all. It's about the biology of the inhabitants." She highlighted various data points. "They're targeting specific biological signatures, those evolved in gentle environments. Species with photosynthetic capabilities like the Elani, water-dependent species like the Cetari, methane breathers like the Volari. They ignore Earth-comparable worlds entirely. Explain, Han said, his eyes narrowing. The swarm doesn't consume planets. They consume specific forms of life. Their own biology seems designed to process and absorb these gentle, evolved species. Minji's voice grew more urgent. And they're specifically avoiding species evolved in harsh conditions. They've never attacked a world with Earth-like conditions or species with our biological makeup. The implications dawned on Han immediately. They can't process us. Something about human biology, and that of other Deathworld species, is incompatible with their consumption process. Exactly, Minji confirmed. And that gives us an advantage we never realized we had. Han studied the tactical display showing the overwhelming swarm forces. Then we use that, he decided. Prepare special teams, Earthborn only, and get me Captain Do-hyun. 2 hours later, 5 small stealth shuttles departed the New Horizon. Each carried a team of 20 humans, all volunteers, all born on Earth rather than on the fleet's ships. Captain Do-hyun, a veteran of dozens of engagements with the swarm, led the mission from the lead shuttle. Final equipment check. Do-hyun ordered as their vessels approached the massive structure at the center of the swarm fleet. Unlike the smaller attack ships, this was a vast, organic-looking construct nearly 10 kilometers across, what intelligence had identified as the central hub of this swarm cluster. The team members checked their specialized environmental suits. Each carried multiple weapons, and most importantly, quantum disruptors. Devices designed by the combined scientific teams of the Sanctuary Fleet to disrupt the unique biological-mechanical interface that powered swarm technology. Remember, Do-hyun said to his team, according to the science team, the swarm's internal environment will be hostile even by Earth standards. Extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, high radiation. Our suits will provide limited protection. But we need to move fast. The young lieutenant beside him, Jae-in, checked her disruptor one final time. If Director Minji is wrong about them ignoring human biological signatures, then none of us are coming back. Do-hyun finished simply. But the rest of the fleet will still have a chance to escape while we distract them. The shuttles approached the central hub, using the chaos of the main battle as cover. As predicted, the swarm vessels seemed to pay little attention to the small craft carrying only human biosignatures. The hub itself had multiple entry points, organic-looking openings that periodically released new swarm attack ships. The 5 shuttles each targeted a different entry point, landing just inside the massive structure. As the teams exited their vessels, they got their first direct look at the interior of a swarm hub. The environment was as hostile as predicted. Even through their protective suits, the humans could feel the crushing gravity, nearly twice Earth normal. The atmosphere, visible as a reddish haze, would have been instantly fatal to unprotected lungs. But most striking was the architecture, if it could be called that. The interior looked like a combination of organic tissue and machine, with pulsing, vein-like structures carrying glowing fluid throughout. There were no straight lines, no right angles. Everything curved and flowed in ways that seemed both natural and deeply alien. Stay focused, Do-hyun ordered as his team moved deeper into the structure. Remember your training. Plant the disruptors at the designated points and get out. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary. The teams moved through the strange environment, following the maps created from long-range scans. Occasionally, they encountered swarm drones, insect-like beings that seemed partially biological and partially mechanical. As Minji had predicted, the drones largely ignored the humans, apparently unable to recognize them as the threat they were. In the central chamber of the hub, Do-hyun's team found what they were looking for, a massive, pulsing organ-like structure that appeared to coordinate the entire swarm cluster. It glowed with reddish energy, bathing the chamber in blood-colored light. Set the disruptors, Do-hyun ordered, checking to ensure the other teams had reached their targets as well. Synchronize timers. We need all 5 points to trigger simultaneously. As the team worked, a larger swarm entity entered the chamber, clearly different from the drones they had encountered earlier. It moved with purpose, its multiple limbs ending in both tools and weapons. It paused, seeming to study the humans with compound eyes that glowed with the same red energy as the central organ. "It sees us," Jaein whispered. The entity approached, extending a limb toward Du Hyun. Instead of attacking, it seemed to be scanning him. After a moment, it withdrew, apparently confused or disinterested. "Keep working," Du Hyun ordered quietly. Director Minji was right. They don't recognize us as a threat. They can't process our biology. The disruptors were placed around the central organ, their timers synchronized. The teams retreated toward their shuttles, moving as quickly as the crushing gravity allowed. Behind them, the quantum disruptors began to glow, interfacing with the biological mechanical systems of the swarm hub. From the bridge of the New Horizon, Admiral Han watched as energy readings from the central hub began to fluctuate wildly. "The teams have succeeded," reported Young-ho. "Quantum disruption is spreading throughout the swarm network. Their ships are losing coordination." Throughout the battle zone, swarm vessels began to move erratically. Some drifted aimlessly while others collided with each other. The organized attack pattern dissolved into chaos. "Signal the fleet," Han ordered. "Target the disorganized vessels first. Clear a path for our evacuation corridor." The Sanctuary fleet ships pressed their advantage, their weapons cutting through the confused swarm vessels. One by one, the 5 stealth shuttles emerged from the hub, racing back toward the protection of the fleet. As the last shuttle docked, the central hub began to collapse in on itself. The quantum disruption had triggered a chain reaction, destroying the biological mechanical interface that gave the swarm its coordinated intelligence. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Concord's Supreme Council gathered in their grand chamber to receive the Sanctuary Fleet's report. High Speaker Maltai, flanked by representatives from 20 major spacefaring species, listened as Admiral Han explained what they had discovered about the Void Swarm's nature and how they had exploited it. "The threat has been neutralized," Han concluded. "Our scientists believe this particular swarm cluster controlled all Void Swarm activity in this sector of the galaxy. With its destruction, the consumed worlds can begin recovery processes, and the surviving species can consider returning to their homeworlds in time. An extraordinary achievement," High Speaker Maltai acknowledged. "The Concord owes the Sanctuary Fleet, and humanity in particular, a debt that cannot easily be repaid." The High Speaker rose from his seat, a formal gesture of highest respect. "When humans first joined the Galactic Concord, we classified Earth as a death world. We viewed your evolutionary history as unfortunate, even tragic. We now understand it was a crucible, forging protectors for the galaxy." Han bowed slightly in acknowledgement. "We evolved in harsh conditions that forced us to adapt, to problem solve, to develop resilience. But it was meeting the Elani, the Centauri, and all the other refugee species that taught us our true purpose. We protected them not because we were stronger, but because together we were complete." In the years that followed, many of the refugee species returned to their recovering homeworlds. Others chose to remain with the Sanctuary Fleet, which evolved from a nomadic refugee haven into a traveling center of culture, science, and defense. And on 1,000 worlds throughout the galaxy, children of all species learned the story of how the beings from a harsh, unforgiving world called Earth had found their purpose among the stars, not as conquerors, but as guardians of those who had evolved in gentler places.